In God's name, the all compassionate, the all merciful, um, peace and blessings upon all of you, my our dear viewers. Welcome to the Radio Resistance Podcast. My name is Kumail Nazari, and today, unfortunately, my co host was unable to join us due to the last minuteness of calling for this episode. But fortunately, we have a very special guest with us, and so we'll still have an engaging conversation. And so yeah, let's dive straight into it. Our guest today is Edward Grondin. Ed served in the U.S. Army between 1994 and 2015. During that time, he served in the 2nd Ranger Battalion, 1st Special Forces Group, as well as a number of other Army units. He started his career as an infantryman, and during this time, he served as a machine gunner, sniper, scout, mortarman, and many other positions. And then he transitioned from infantry to military intelligence and served as a signals intelligence, so say an analyst. Um, he served as a special operation team Alpha, and later served as an instructor there as well. He served in Iraq, but not in Afghanistan, although he was very active and actively involved in the fight in Afghanistan as a SIGINT analyst. So, welcome, Ed, to the Radio Resistance Podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
If there's anything I've missed in the bio, please go ahead and uh, add, and feel free to add onto it.
Oh, and what you missed? No, it's you pretty much hit the high points. Like I said, served as a ranger with the 2nd Ranger Battalion, served with 1st Group, deployed to Iraq, and obviously not to Afghanistan. Very familiar with it. Worked it from here in the States, and yeah, that's about it. And I've been since I've been out in 2015. Um, I've been somewhat actively involved in things that have been going on since this administration took over. Been very much keeping my eyes on what's going on, and my family has been actively involved trying to have a positive effect on things going on over there.
Awesome. Yeah. So today we wanted to discuss and the reason for why this is such a last minute. We called for this episode the very last minute. It was due to the certain events that just happened this past week, or a very specific event, and that was the White House's after action report of what was a chaotic withdrawal, um, but it was politically whitewashed in this report. And so I think that the biggest community that such a thing affects, apart from, of course, Afghanistan, the people of Afghanistan, the former Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, are U.S. and NATO forces who, not only those who did participate um, in Afghanistan, but in general, this applies to all veterans and the entire military at large. As far as morale is concerned, as far as on so many different levels, right? So yeah, this is, Ed, we'd love to hear from you, your thoughts. Um, uh, we saw the is it John Kirby, um, the national security spokesman, uh, just I don't even know what your words to use, but it just was blindly defending the White House's report, and beyond that, it was absolute. In that press conference, he was just tone deaf and um, dismissed the chaos entirely. Didn't speak on that whatsoever, right? What did you think, Ed, of the?
Well,
Mhm.
I honestly, to be honest with you, I did not watch the press conference. I read the press release and everything, and I don't know if I could have handled the watching the press conference. If I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Um, For myself, it becomes very difficult listening to that, and I almost need to sit down and read it afterwards so that if I need to, I can take a step away. It's hard for me when I see people who have sworn to serve this country and our Constitution in the way many of these people have, dishonor it in the way that they do. Um, as somebody who served in a Ranger battalion, and there's a lot of things that we swore to do. There's a whole Ranger creed, and I'm not going to sit here and bore everybody with all that right now. But one of the things we talk about is never leaving a fallen comrade,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very much kind of the core of what who and what we are. And the military in general has very much adopted those same principles. And we're talking about people who are putting their political careers before um, the country they serve. They're putting their political careers before, the soldiers, because arguably these leaders, as I was taught and trained and learned in my military career, as a leader, uh, you're a servant. You are in charge of people, but you actually serve those who you're in charge with. It's your responsibility to take care of them. It's your responsibility to lead them. It's your responsibility to make sure they have what they need. And when possible, obviously, we're talking about a dangerous work in fighting wars. But whenever possible, that you are doing everything that in your power to protect those within your charge. And I feel that many of our key leadership have been completely and just unforgivably remiss in all of these areas, and have, along with all the way up, all the way up through this administration, including up to the White House, have forgotten the key thing that um, we have forgotten. As I have heard in many different areas of my life, there's that employer employee relationship. And what many of these people have forgotten to understand is they are not the employer, we are.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones who work for us. They're not the ones who tell us what we're going to do. We are the people. We are the ones that tell them this is what the will and the wish of the people is, and they've forgotten that,
Mm-hmm.
completely forgotten that in everything that we see here.
Yeah. And are you concerned as far as security threats? Is that also
Oh
a
God, yes. I'm,
mm,
I'm concerned with security threats, and as of right now, as we speak, I've got a 3-year-old daughter here at home. And her and her mom are sitting in the next room. Myself, I am always concerned greatly. I live in a place where I think my risk within the United States is probably pretty low, but um, it's a risk I take very seriously. And we are a country that is full of what we always refer to as soft targets. Everybody refers to these high payoff targets and these hardened sites, and they're worried about it. I was like, this country's full of soft targets. Just full of so many targets that are undefended and not properly defended. And to a terrorist with the least bit of imagination, they would make easy targets. And they're places where our families are. They're places where our friends are. They're places where we are on a daily basis. You know, and so yeah, I do concern myself. I also concern myself with something that you touched on briefly with my fellow veterans in this country who have served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and who continue to serve and to fight and are concerned with what's going on over there. Um, we lost too many people over there. I'm not even going to pretend that that's not something that bothers me. Um, but at the same time, when we have people who've shed their blood over there and they're coming, and then people who are coming back here and feel like they maybe feel like they fought for something, and we're losing the uptick in veteran suicides in this country recently is alarming since the withdrawal. And my girlfriend served in Afghanistan, and I know it has taken a toll on her,
mm,
and I see it on a day-to-day basis. And that I hold the administration directly responsible because of the steps they've taken, the things they've done. Do we regret the things that we did when we served? No, not at all. I'd do it all
Mm-hmm.
over again. But when you've got people serving in that way, you've got to honor that service and do what is necessary to complete the fight, to do what's necessary to get the job done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that later in the podcast. I'm glad you brought it up. And I know that this may be difficult to go into a little more, but the document that you mentioned, right? You said you didn't get a chance to watch that press conference. I'm glad, actually. That would have, you know,
Those
no,
things are painful to watch.
man. This one was, the last. I think. I mean, I saw the reactions on social media, and I saw plenty of veterans who were just like, "This was the final straw." This was just the
Yeah.
last straw. But so in that document, there was an emphasis on the need to focus on supporting veterans who may be experiencing mental health challenges as a result of
Mhm.
their service. Um, I mean, I don't want to just ask you this generic question of a
Don't be
significance of
shy.
the important significance or importance of it, because we know that that's something. But what I mean, and we also, yes, I think we both covered this as far as this being a huge slap on the face. But what do you think can be done to better support veterans in this regard? Um,
Oh God. As someone who has been involved and been in and out of the Veterans Administration programs over the last few years, to start with, just actually have the services that are promised. I mean, that would go a long ways because I've lost track how many veterans I've known who've gone in for services that were claimed to be there and they're not, or there's not enough manpower to be able to facilitate those things. Call up to make an appointment for whether it's psychological help or this or that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well we can get you in 6 months."
uh,
I'm sorry, that's just that's disgraceful. It's flat out disgraceful on the part of this country and what they're doing with my fellow veterans. And I know there's, and I can't say this is directly related to what's happened here in the last couple weeks, but I suspect it may be. And I'm not going to throw the guy's name out there just for that reason. But there's and among the special operations community, it's a pretty tight knit community, and we lost a guy back on March 27th to, from what I'm to understand, was suicide. And this was a guy who was shot 27 times in Iraq. Um, Lived to tell about it. Actually, lived to come back and got up and killed the guys who were trying to kill him. And continued his service for years after that, and then finally retired, and then just recently committed suicide. Um, I find it very hard to swallow that a guy like that, who has that sort of um, guts and that just fight in him, after getting shot that many times to fight back, is going to be the guy that's just going to throw in the towel for anything. That's the type of guy who's been out there, been in the community, and has very much been a pillar. And most of the guys in the community that may hear this will probably know exactly who I'm talking about. So
no, thank you
it's
for
hard to see
sharing
that.
that. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think that captures actually the, um, you mentioned that there it may be related. We never know, right? But
I
but
don't claim to know.
yeah,
Like I said, I don't have any solid information that that's why he
right.
committed suicide. But I mean,
No, yeah,
knowing those type of people, God, what else could it be at this point? And I hate to try to, and that's why I said I'm not going to use his name, but I hate to use a fellow veteran for any sort of political or try to make any sort of a point like that. But to me, it's a one of the many symptoms I'm seeing with the problems that we've got right now.
Yeah. No, no, you know, again, like just reactions, and I'm talking about, you know, I follow Afghanistan very closely, and here in the U.S., it was like, okay, a very long period of absolutely nothing coming from the White House, right? And then this past week, we had this, right? So and when I saw all the reactions, right, it's so much, right, and for the first time, I was seeing so many veterans coming out, and they were the critics, right, and they're pointing out flaws in the whole execution of the withdrawal, um, and yeah, so many were many are feeling that that whole idea of this the fight being I mean the sacrifices being in vain, right? So no, it's understandable, very much so.
Well,
um
I would
mhm.
say the precursor to us pulling out is one of one of the things that I take a lot of issue with as a lot of the proponents for us getting out. One of the arguments I've heard time and time and time again is the how many years we were there, how much money we spent, and I listened to it, and I mean, it sounds on its face, it sounds like a great argument. Um, but the problem is, at no point in our time in Afghanistan did our country ever invest the time, effort, willpower, money needed to actually get anything done. I mean, it'd be like if I went and hopped in my car and wanted to do a 2 hour drive, but every time I tried to do the drive, I only threw $1 of gas in, and went as far as that would take me. Well, I'd run out of gas, halfway out of town, walk back home, get it, next day I'd throw another dollar of gas in, and well, guess what? I'd only make it to the edge of town again, anyways. I do this for 20 years. I'm never going to leave town. Well, I can sit here and tell you how much money I spent on gas and how much time I spent trying to get to that, place that's 2 hours away and never got there. I mean, that's literally what we did in Afghanistan. You know, uh,
Mhm.
a lot of the guys that we had over there, I mean, I know a lot of them personally, and I know the blood, sweat, and tears they put in, and I know they gave it their all. But the problem is, as a country, we didn't. And
Mhm.
so to sit here and jump up and down and stomp our feet and talk about, well, we were there for 20 years. Congratulations. We never once in that 20 years did we dedicate the resources that were necessary to do the job. And so I think that, to me, it falls on deaf ears, the argument of how long we were there and how much money we spent. When we talk about the amount of money we're trying to waste on other silliness in this country at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, those 20 years, it was different administrations, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like this was it's a partisan issue
Oh,
necessarily, right?
I can
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
would agree with you wholeheartedly. I hold both parties accountable.
Yeah.
Um,
Eh,
I mean, I very much consider myself very much a conservative but libertarian leanings, but at the same time, I don't consider myself a Republican. I don't consider myself a Democrat, and I think both parties we can hold at fault.
yeah. Yeah, and you know, with that being said, however, it's what we saw with this report and then that press conference, right? I mean, we've seen the lying, we've seen the narrative spinning, we've seen this pretense of theater successes in Afghanistan. I'm specifically in during the course of this administration,
Yeah,
well, even prior to, and this none of that is new necessarily, right? But
yeah.
the Kirby's arrogance and reaction of being offended at challenges of his remarks is that's an unprecedented this was coming from the veteran community as well, that this was an unprecedented slap to our vets, right? um where does our military even go from here after such a deep betrayal from and you know, that
Well,
betrayal being, well, before, sorry,
yeah. Yeah, go
before
ahead.
that, yeah, before that, let me just ask you this. That whole blame game itself, right, shifting blame on the previous administration and not owning up to mistakes having been made, right? What are your thoughts there? Like what?
Well, yeah, starting with that, it's as simple, in my opinion, as you're in the office, you own up to it. It's not like this happened. It's not like this withdrawal came, a couple days after he took office or something. I mean, this was months after he took office. He had time to turn around how many other policies that the previous administration had put in. If he didn't agree with this one, it was as simple as him, doing an executive order or pushing through. I mean, that's a change of course he could have done with a stroke of a pen in an afternoon. And so, I mean, to blame it on a previous administration when he himself was also part of one of the previous administrations that was involved with Afghanistan. When he was vice president under Obama, and there was, we could go off about a lot of the stuff that went wrong under that administration as well, where he was there, and even his own party and members of that White House have no problem, um, for lack of a better way of saying it, trash talking his inability to ever make the right decision, even when Obama was president. And
Right.
now, why should we be surprised when now that he's president, he's basically following the same playbook and screwing it up under his own administration?
No, that's a very good point. And I actually recently was reading something. Now I don't know, if this was, I haven't gotten to um, reaching any conclusions here, but apparently there were some back channel like talks um, pre, the Doha talks during that administration as well. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard anything about that?
Um, I've heard rumblings, but I can't speak that I really know much more than it probably sounds like you might be familiar with. But every administration that has been in office while we've been in Afghanistan has there's always backdoor discussions. There's always and anybody who tries to tell you there isn't, I mean, is just a fool or they're lying, one or the other or both. Um, every administration is doing it. Yeah, that's the short answer. But when you go from having backdoor discussions, it's one thing to have a backdoor discussion with the Taliban or any other terrorist organization for that matter. It's a whole nother thing to bring it up on the table and to be openly helping and supporting them, like the current administration is with paying them money. Um, I mean, how do you even begin to justify that? I don't care. I mean, because obviously, if they're sending them money, I mean, there's been some back channel discussions. There's been some back channel agreements. I mean, or else why are we sending them money? You know. So yeah, has
And
there been back channel discussions? Oh yeah,
yeah, yeah. So this predates, the former administration as well, and
hmm
yeah, it's during again that entire 20 years, right?
yeah.
Just today, I don't know if you've read about this yet, but Senator Lindsey Graham, he blasted the White House's that whole after action report, and he called it he called it a political whitewash. That's what it was. And
Yeah, I think I saw that headline. I was scrolling through a few things today, and as I was kind of getting ready to mentally to think about what we were talking about today, and I did remember seeing that.
yeah, and one thing that he mentioned, it was like some of the things that President Trump did, he disagreed with, right?
Yeah,
But he wasn't the one that withdrew.
yeah,
You mentioned that as well, right? That ultimately there were so many options, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
There's
and
so many options, and the previous administration had a lot of uh, catches in the plan where it's basically said that if the Taliban doesn't do this or doesn't meet that, we're not going to follow through with this. And even under the previous administration, they had already backpedaled a number of things because of things the Taliban did, and the Taliban pretty much threw it out as soon as the new administration came in, and we still followed through. Why? I mean,
Mhm.
we were honestly under no obligation to follow through with it, not only because it was a new administration, but because, if we're going to argue this on the case of there's an agreement between us and the Taliban for a pullout, um, well, they didn't hold up to their end of the deal, so why do we need to hold up to ours again? That's that's just a very simple thing. So it
Yeah.
throws out pretty much every argument they've got about why they had to do the
Mhm.
pullout.
Right. Right. Yeah, I've heard, yeah, from that to reputation to this to that, but nothing. No, no, no. Biden is President Biden is infallible, of course, right? Um, and that's what I got from uh, National Security spokesman John Kirby in that press conference. It was just a complete defense of and
He's a yes
he,
man for the administration, unfortunately. At that point,
yeah,
I
he
mean,
said,
what do you say? I mean, he's a press. He's another one of Biden's press secretaries at that point. I mean,
yep, yep.
what else can you
He's
say?
Yeah, he said that President Biden had acted in accordance with the best judgment of his advisors, and then when asked if any officials involved with the withdrawal would be removed from their posts as a result of the report, Kirby said its purpose is not accountability. So,
Yeah, then exactly what is the that's
right.
so counterintuitive, and I would say if I was in the White House and I had made a completely ignorant decision, as everything involved with this pullout appears to be, and I claimed that I followed my advisors. One, I would be remiss because one, they're there to advise me. It's still my decision. Two, if I'm really leaning on my advisors and they're giving me that kind of bad information, every one of them would be out of a job tomorrow. I mean, it's just nowhere else other than our government does that fly as logic. You know,
Yeah, I
running
was
a
gonna
company and
ask
I
you
got
that.
yeah. I was gonna say yeah. If I'm running a company and I got advisors giving me that kind of advice, you're all fired. It's just really simple.
Yeah, and the proof is in the pudding. President Biden was claiming that we eradicated all terrorist threats in Afghanistan, and that's why he withdrew to the
Oh my
end the
god,
longest war, right?
that's
Graham, I mean, these were
yeah.
Graham's words, right? But General Kurilla just last week said, who's this head of CENTCOM, that the rise of ISIS K and Al Qaeda in Afghanistan is so severe that we could be attacked in America in the next 6 months without warning.
And
Right?
if anybody in this administration is admitting that to you, I'll say you can take that and make it even worse. It's if it's bad enough that they're admitting to it, it's the gloves are off. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a complete lie. So now I think it's more appropriate to ask you, and I know that it's a very loaded question. What I had mentioned asked
Yeah,
earlier. Yeah,
I'll
but
dig through it the best I can.
yeah, but where does our military go from here after such deep betrayal?
Well, I'll give you the short answer first. Um, the short answer is our military continues to do what they've always done. They continue to follow the orders that are given to them. They continue to fight for the interests of our country and to defend the Constitution. That's the short answer. And if I were still in, that would still be the answer when I was in. But um, are you really going to be? How much are you going to be behind the fight that you're getting sent to? If you know you're being lied to, you're being lied about, you're not being supported. I mean, we're seeing now we're seeing record lows in the amount of people that the military is being able to recruit. I mean, and there's so many reasons for that. The withdrawal from Afghanistan is kind of the tipping point with a lot of that. Young people are like, why would I go into a job where they're going to send me into harm's way and then just pull the rug out from underneath me? It doesn't stand the logic test, and you know, it, we we're going to have a hard time finding people that are going to do the job. A lot of senior people. that have been there for years doing it and have been through all of this, when this type of stuff happens, they're going to be like, I'm done. Yeah, I could stay and I could do my 20, 30 years and retire. It's not worth it. I got a family. I got kids. I'm going home. I'm going back to being an average civilian, and I'm going to live my life. Um, so yeah, the short answer is that the military is going to go on. The military always will go on, but the real question is, how do the things that have happened affect the way that the average American views the military
Hmm.
and views the military leadership? That I think is almost the bigger question.
Right.
Because as a veteran, I mean, I would say the general image that the average person has of military is still very positive. I mean, I get it as a veteran. I get people, thanking me for my service. They talk to me about my time in the military. They do whatever, and I get it, and they tend to have a fairly positive view of the military as a whole and people who have served. Um, but then if I get in a discussion with that same person about the current
Politics.
leadership and the administration, I mean, you can watch the color drain from their face. You can watch the smile turn upside down, and it just turns ugly. You know,
Hmm.
the people of this country, I think, hold the military in general in high regard. But I think, um, especially with current administration, they have come to understand that those who serve in the military and their leadership can very much be separated into two different entities.
You're right, but I find that very problematic. Just as
Oh
a
yes,
private
yes.
civilian, uh, the those who are actually sacrificing their voices should be um, heard the most, right? Or most of the attention paid to.
I
Um,
think I think some questions need to be asked. Like, as I think I talked with you before about how the different people are being used as commentators on news programs and things like that. And they always go to these high-ranking people, retired military, retired generals, colonels, whatever. Um, I would challenge them to start finding people who have served in lower levels, who maybe at least maybe they weren't even officers there. Get some enlisted guys, get some guys who got out as maybe junior officers or NCOs or whatever, who have been down there. They've been, they've had their hands in the dirt. They really know down and dirty what's going on, and they know. I'm not getting this story of, well, I asked my generals what was needed and they told me nothing. I guarantee you, if I go down to that general's, lower enlisted guys and say, okay, what do we really need here? I promise you, we get a different story. I promise you, they just want somebody who's going to make a decision. Abbey Gate, when when the suicide bombers went off, there were guys who had eyes on. There's and during the congressional hearings, there um, people who actually testified to that. They had their eyes on one of the bombers and were requesting authorization to shoot, and kept getting told, we'll get back to you. Basically, we'll don't know if we can shoot or not, and that's unforgivable.
mm,
Because when not only are our troops in harm's way at that point, but the people they're supposed to be protecting are in harm's way. And I mean, that's what we're there for. And if we can't make a timely decision, I mean, what are we doing? I mean,
mhm.
we are failing on an epic level at that point. And it shows. I mean, I know I'm not going to get into details here, but there was a couple situations I had in Iraq. I know I caught some flack for making some decisions under fire, and making some decisions when we had people in harm's way, and decisions need to be made about levels of force. And I caught flack because they thought I went a little over. As it turned out, I kind of got my ass chewed, and came back. And later on, they kept letting me make those kind of decisions because they realized in the long term it was the right decision to have been made. But I made it because guys that outranked me at that particular time wouldn't make it. They're too scared of it. They were afraid of losing their rank. They were afraid of the repercussions. And I used to tell all my soldiers, as I got out as a senior NCO, and I would tell them as an NCO, one of the things you've got to always be ready to do is pretty much take your stripes off, throw them on the table. and I'm willing to gamble those stripes for the decisions I'm making. And I pretty much held to that. And our key leadership is not following through to that. A lot of our NCOs that I knew and worked with would do that. They would do it every day, all day long. But as people got higher up, they were less willing to make those kind of bets and those kind of sacrifices.
Oh. Yeah, no, that's very sad, and as you know mentioned, but uh, the report, right? You know, um, when I was going through it, there was one point that was made about uh, there having been no plans in place for conducting the final withdrawal or evacuating, and that's that the evacuation part is something that, you know, I can speak on a bit because I was involved in that whole scene. I've been involved. I'm still involved, and you know that itself has been an utter
It's
chaos and
unforgivable.
a mess of its own, right? And yeah, okay, there you go. You said it
I,
best.
I,
You know,
I,
yeah,
I don't know how else to say it, but it's
there's,
unforgivable. If you're going to put people in harm's way, if you're going to make a decision like that where you are basically pulling the carpet out from underneath people, if you come out and do like this, admits that we basically didn't have a plan in place for this, but yet we did it anyways. Oh my God! I mean, the level of negligence in that admission alone is just astounding.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah, right.
even if we were to just full stop right there, I mean,
Yeah.
that's an astounding level of negligence, and I don't even begin to, and then to hear them make statements, and they're not. One that really hit home for me was they had made a comment about it, when they were trying to secure Karzai International Airport
Mhm.
to conduct the withdrawal, and they're talking about it taking 72 hours to secure an airfield. You know, a lot of people who haven't been in the SOF community may or may not know. One of the key things that an Army Ranger is trying to do is secure an airfield. I mean, we are a first strike um, option for the military. If we're going to go into it, like if we're going to invade a country for whatever reason, if we need to go into a country, one of the first things we need is an airfield. We are trained to go in and secure an airfield, even if it's held by enemy forces. I
Mhm.
mean, that's what they did in Panama. That's what they did in Grenada. I mean, that's what the Rangers did, and that was their bread and butter. And to tell me it's going to take us 72 hours to hit an airfield, that tells me you didn't know the tools you had in your toolbox. I promise you right now, if we activate a Ranger battalion, I could pretty much um, guarantee you we could secure any airfield in this planet in
Mhm.
24 to 48 hours from the moment the decision was made. And that's being very open. I would say probably easily within 24 hours.
Mhm.
It's and that's Rangers on the ground. That's aircraft on the ground. That's follow up troops to reinforce after the field has been actually taken. Um, talking Marines, talking airborne units, what have you. It,
Mhm.
24 to 48 hours. It should never take more than that. And if it does, somebody doesn't know what they're doing.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And I mean, you go from there, and as I think we're kind of alluding to, is about how much stuff went sideways there. I mean, I've I just saw recently they're talking about the numbers of Americans that when this pullout initially happened, and when we after the pullout was quote unquote finished, and
Mhm.
we were talking about how many people were left behind, whether it was Afghans or whether it was U.S. citizens, and they're like, oh yeah, there's less than 100 U.S. citizens. And then since then we've literally pulled out hundreds of U.S. citizens out of Afghanistan since then, and they're like, oh yeah, there's still so many U.S. citizens there, and that number is higher than what they first admitted to there even being, even after we've pulled hundreds out.
Right. Yeah.
If that doesn't point in a very clear statement that we've been lied to on an epic scale, I mean, I don't know what else can.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, also just another thing there with some of those. operations, those evacuation operations, there was Talibs that got on board on some of those planes, and they're now walking the streets of thing. Well, there are
Yeah,
certain intelligence agencies have said that, or we've heard that they do know and they have found these individuals, but how sure can one be? You know.
yeah, and
Uh,
and if we already know that people we have brought in through these different um, withdrawal and evacuation steps that we've taken, we already know we've got bad actors coming in, and to not bring in people that we know are good, that have been verified, that have been confirmed, is unforgivable. And I mean, I kind of go back to the part of the Ranger Creed about not leaving a fallen comrade. You don't leave somebody behind. I mean, we've got a lot of people who fought alongside of us in Afghanistan, whether these were local Afghanis who were interpreters, whether they were key military people who helped us to do what we were doing. Um, we owe it to them. I don't really I mean, yes, it is a different thing than a U.S. citizen. I'll grant some people that, but in my book, it isn't, because we made promises to those people. We made promises to them that basically, at the end of the day, if you help us out, we'll get you out of here. We'll get you, we'll get you U.S. citizenship. We'll, what have you. And we made those promises, um, and our soldiers that were on the ground were fighting alongside of these people and trusting them, and that trust and that faith was built on that original promise, and they paid their end of the bargain. And as far as I'm concerned, we owe it to them to get them out. I had a guy that was working with me in Iraq, and we were working, we were diligently working to get him out, because he had basically he'd been getting us information and helping us out with a lot of the terrorist problem in Ramadi, where I was at, and we knew that they had found out about him. So we were trying to get him to leave Iraq and work on getting him to the states, indirect, get him out of Iraq first, and then get him into the United States, him and his family. And his response to us was basically, "I'm not leaving. This is my country. I'm staying here till the end." That was the last time I talked with him. You know, the next thing I saw, I see a video of him being beheaded. I mean, it just to leave our, I mean, I've got the utmost respect for a guy like that. I mean, he made his choice, and I hate to say it that way, but we were trying to do the right thing with that. We were trying to get him out there and do right by him. But he felt that was his country, and he was right. It was his country, and he wanted to stay there. He said, I can't look in my kid's face and know that I abandoned, our home to bad men. You know, Unfortunately, he paid the price, and so have a lot of people over the conflicts we've been in, in our military, in the local populace, in the countries we've been in, Afghanistan, Iraq. You know, it's hard. It's very hard to um, close that loop in my mind and say, yeah, where's the difference between getting a U.S. citizen out and that guy was putting his life on the line to help us? Because those who are helping us in Afghanistan absolutely were putting their lives on the line.
Yeah, and especially with Afghanistan, I think that was a really great point. And I also completely do understand that for any country, their primary concern will always be their own citizens, right?
Yeah,
But in Afghanistan's case, in addition to what you mentioned, there was uh, the whole war on terror, right? Like who were we fighting? Did we go to Afghanistan to fight Afghans, or was this a joint effort, right? Well, when we first went in, right, they were the United Front, or what's also known as the Northern Alliance. Um, you know, the, uh, cooperation with them, and then of course when the republic was formed, the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, right? um, uh, they exactly, they were partners in this war on terror. And what the in this current administration, President Biden, he absolutely, I'll never forget it was sometime in April of 2021 when he said this, that he made a statement, and then also repeated it in August, how we nation building was never a part of our uh, goals or objectives. So, okay, if nation building wasn't a part of it, and we were there for 20 years and to fight terrorists, right? We
Hmm.
created or helped create a whole military force, right?
Yeah.
To thing, and now we're withdrawing when they're at the peak of their strength, according to I think so. That's statement. I have it over here. He was, Biden mentioned. He said, President Biden said, "We'll hold the Taliban accountable for its commitment not to allow any terrorists to threaten the United States or its allies from Afghan soil. The Afghan government has made that commitment to us as well, and we'll focus our full attention on that threat we face today. And we'll, oh, and this part right here, and we'll continue.
It gets better.
It gets yeah, yeah, better or worse,
Yeah.
it's
But
hard,
wait, there's more.
hard to,
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you right there at that point. As far as the nation building goes, here's the thing. It's kind of like with the analogy I used earlier about putting gas in the tank and never getting where you're going. If my mission is, if my whole purpose in life is to drive a vehicle from point A to point B, okay, that's my purpose. Okay, at some point, especially if it's a long enough drive, guess what I'm going to have to do? I'm going to have to get gas. That's not my mission. That's not what I'm setting out to do. But by God, I'm going to have to do it at some point. Otherwise, I'm not getting there. Nation building may not have been what we went in there for, but we went in there to go after terrorists. We went in there to deny them a place to train, to operate, to live a safe haven. Was a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the stuff that was spouted off. Okay, great. I think we can all agree the fact that just because I kill a couple of guys who are key leaders, that doesn't end the terrorism. And in fact, in some cases, it actually makes it worse, because now we've made a martyr, and now that's recruiting gold mine for the terrorists. So if my goal is to deny them a place a safe haven and a place to operate, I can't just go in there and kill everybody that I know to be a terrorist and walk away. It just doesn't work that way. When you're dealing with a country like Afghanistan that arguably did not have a lot of infrastructure, did not have a lot of really solid governance of their own, and by governance, I mean anything in the way of military and police force to be able to fight these threats on their own. I mean, if we legitimately want to deny a safe haven, we've got to help develop that. Is that nation building? Yeah, okay, it's nation building, but at the same time, you almost can't separate it
They go hand in
from
hand. Yeah.
our mission. Yeah, I mean, it's if you want to do the ending of terrorism, or you want to deny them a safe haven, well, that place where they're considering a safe haven, you have to make that as unwelcoming and as uncomfortable as you can for them, and we can't do that if there's not a force, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be military. If there's not a force there to make it uncomfortable for them, we've already failed before we got off the ground. That's
Mm.
the long and short of it. So the argument about, well, we never wanted to do nation building and that's not our mission. Great, we can say that all day long,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, you can't really separate them out. I mean, we're not there to set in our own government. We're not there to choose the government, if you will. You can argue those cases, but to say completely that there wasn't, we didn't want a nation build, you can't separate it. You really
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, and that was a great analogy, and it's, and also through the actions we saw in the past 20 years. Okay, so we're not calling it nation building, but putting this much, granting this much funds, allocating this kind of budget for specific projects that were unrelated to military operations, right? Unrelated to uh, solely the national defense and security forces. That also just goes to show that both of these things do go hand in hand in order, like you said, to prevent or to the opposite of this being a safe haven for those terrorists. uh, 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 um, Different kinds of initiatives and efforts were taken and needed to be taken and put in
And
place,
a lot
right?
of those, unfortunately, we did in ways that really didn't work because too many people that were in the decision making process didn't understand cultural differences. They didn't understand, a lot of the there's probably a lot more than the average person is going to ever understand. There are a lot of similarities between Afghanistan and the United States, but at the same time, there is a lot of very vast differences culturally, and just a lot of the tribalness of it is an idea that most Americans and a lot of people in government and in the halls of power just can't even begin to seem to wrap their brains around. If you build if you go into one village and you build a well, for them because okay, we were in there and they'll help us out, but they can't put food on the table and they can't get clean water. Okay, and guess what? We'll dig you a well. Well, will you help us out then? Oh yeah, sure. We go dig them a well. The village next door gets mad because we didn't help them. They end up going through there and blowing up the well and
Destroy.
and doing God knows what to the actual people. Uh, those are two villages who may or may not have ever done anything ill towards each other if we hadn't been in there and done that. I mean, we were very ham-fisted, very ignorant in the way that we interacted, and we did not have the manpower to fully comprehend it. We also didn't have a lot of handoff. There was no institutional knowledge that was transitioned. And one of the problems that our military had is when our units would rotate in and out, a lot of the information that they would gain while they were there would not get handed to the next unit. So it was like starting a whole new conflict all over with a new unit every time it came in. Guess what? The Taliban knew that. Everybody we were fighting against knew that. They're like, there goes the buzzer. It's time for a new unit. They're not going to know what they're doing. Time to hit them.
Mhm.
However, and so on so many levels, we were going in there not understanding the battle we were even fighting, and that goes back to my initial analogy about us not dedicating the manpower, the materials, the resources necessary to actually fight the war properly.
Mhm.
Um, whether you say we were fighting terrorists, whether you say we were nation building, whether I don't care what you say we were doing, we did not dedicate the forces and the resources necessary to do any of it.
Mhm. Mhm. Now it's just lessons learned, right?
I would hope it's lessons learned, but I would almost argue these are lessons we should have learned in conflicts in the
I was being
past.
sarcastic,
Yeah,
like
I know. I just
cigar,
I
cigar,
cringe.
cigar.
Yeah,
The cigar reports are, they're gonna start coming out, right?
yeah, yeah.
This is what we
These are
learned.
lessons we should have already learned, and we haven't, and it's sad. Um, it's like the old line about history repeating itself. I would argue history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme once in a while. I mean, it, our pullout of Afghanistan, I've heard many people compare it to our pullout of Vietnam with the rapidity and the just ugliness of it. Okay, there's a lot of differences when you understand the histories in both of those places about what led up to it, how it actually went down, this, that, and the other thing. But by God, there's enough similarities there. I can understand that, and just the failure of our government on both of those pullouts is astounding and scarily similar.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, just quickly going back to that statement from President Biden. He there was just this one that towards the end where he said that and will continue to support the rights of Afghan women and girls by maintaining significant humanitarian and development assistance. Right. Um, how has this
How is the first question I would be asking
how,
at that
right,
too.
right, the how. I mean, but I guess, yes, we both know that, that isn't the case. Just in these past few weeks alone, um there's well, one case I'll just mention. There's plenty of others, but just one
Of
case. There was
course.
Nargis Sadat, who was the founder of the Afghan women's movement. I believe that's what it was called. Yeah, the Afghan women's movement. She's detained by the. Was detained by the Taliban. She's still in a Taliban uh,
Yeah.
prison, and you know, we don't see any sort of actions being taken. We see a lot of these special representatives that have been appointed, with coming out with statements of condemnations here and there, but no actual actions, right? Nothing tangible really coming out of this. So uh, I'll only ask you two more questions. So
No,
one,
I'm like I said, I'm yours for the night. You ask me
yeah.
what you will.
Appreciate that. Appreciate it. I think we're approaching the 1 hour mark, so
Yeah.
with the viewers, it's might get a
Well,
little
I'll just
long, but yeah.
I'll throw one thing at you here real quick with what you had just said. One, I kind of take issue with a lot of the stuff on whether it's women and children or however we want to look at the rights. It's human rights, man. We see the same thing in this country. The minute we start dividing people, we're going to have a problem. Uh, we need to get it in our head that we need to defend all Afghanis. Whether it's and I understand women and children are having a much rougher go of it, and I fully comprehend that. But if we're taking a holistic look at it, we're going to see that, and we're going to address that as well. Yeah, so it's and the other thing is what you said about people making statements against what has happened. That's the problem in the world and in our country specifically. People don't know how to act. People don't know how to fight something. In this country, that people's activism means I like it, I gave it a thumbs up, I followed it, I retweeted it, and they think they're activists. And you know what? You got to put rubber to the road, and at some point, somebody's going to get their feelings hurt, and probably more than their feelings hurt. And if that ain't happening, we're probably not making any headway.
Mhm. No, I love that point right there. And I wholly agree. Um, yes, there's no doubt that women are facing harsher circumstances. It's just the nature of the uh, ideological backing of or background of the Taliban and these other
Oh
Islamist
yes,
terrorist groups
yes.
who do thing. And it's there's plenty of, at this point right now, I think even Human Rights Watch, or was it Amnesty, I'm not sure, but there's uh, enough enough brutality and oppression that women specifically are facing, where they're calling where this is, it's a gender apartheid. That's what this
Yeah,
the situation is being referred
yeah.
to. However, what you said, as far as all all of this pertaining to human rights, right? And that actually, um, I personally believe that the both for the people of Afghanistan and those who are trying to help, right? That this the situation needs to be seen through that lens, through this lens of a more united lens, right? Uh, and not separating. So because when you do that, right, it's like, okay, well, we're you're telling basically the people that, hey, settle, where you can settle with this, right? Like, no, we're not no one should be told to settle with some very basic uh uh
Well, I think I know where you're going to, and one thing I'd throw in there is women and children in Afghanistan. I know one of the problems that they struggle with too is especially if, with a lot of the way things work, if the man is taken from the house, whether he's killed, whether he's taken out, whether he's captured, whether he's whatever, they're left with nothing.
mm,
And if we cannot put hedge that if we can't cut that off, if we can't stop that from happening, yeah, we're going to need a whole lot more resources to help the women and children of that country. You know, but if we just completely ignore the fact that why is this even happening? You know, we've been in contact with women who've lost husbands because they've been killed by the Taliban. We've got to start there too. I mean, I got it. I'm gonna try. You know, we can do our best to help the women and children, but if we can't stop the men from getting killed, I mean, we got to do a holistic approach.
Perpetual, yep, perpetual cycle there. Yeah. Okay. So, just as a final question, and then we'll go to closing remarks. Anything you'd like to add? But in light of these recent developments, right, such as the White House's sending of these classified Afghanistan documents to Congress, and the the um, the blind defending that happened as well. How do you think that the efforts, after all, our podcast is called Radio Resistance. So, how do you think that the efforts of the anti-Taliban resistance in Afghanistan may impact, the broader political landscape and future outcomes in the region, and also from an American perspective, from the U.S. government's perspective, do you see any potential cooperation, support?
And I hate to be the wet blanket on a lot of stuff, but with the current administration, I don't see a lot of help coming. And I am very rarely the negative guy on this type of stuff, and I hate to be so, but this administration is so stuck on the fact that they've done nothing wrong and not wanting to help. I don't see help coming from our administration, and I know there's a lot of us out there who are trying our best and are trying to do what we can. Um, but on as far as in Afghanistan, I mean, there's no easy answers, and the problem is it's once the tide starts turning, it's hard to reverse the direction. And the tide turned before we left. The Taliban was already sweeping through the country, so the tide had already turned. To reverse that tide, especially without outside help, it's a monumental task. I I wish I could offer an answer, but I couldn't even begin to. It's a monumental task, and the men that are fighting it, I have the utmost respect for.
Hmm.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine what they're going through, and I just I hope they can hold out. I really do,
Hmm.
and because the world is watching. Our governments are idiots. They're saying all the wrong things, and in a lot of cases, they don't represent us, and they're too worried about covering their own asses. But the world is watching, and we want to help. We really do.
Yeah. No, thank you, man. That was superb, actually answered, and for the reason of, there's a mutual friend of ours. She says this all the time. Honesty saves time, right? And that right there, is I think that the probably the most accurate analysis, and we just saw right this week proves that first part, especially with this administration
First thing you
probably
got to do to
not
fix the
gonna.
mistake is own it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, so no, I want to take a moment to just express my deep appreciation for your, not only your dedication and sacrifice in serving our country, but to all veterans, to all who have, whether it be Afghanistan or wherever it has been, and to those who are watching. And I know that words aren't enough, right? But I have, that's at this moment the most that we do, some of us have to offer. So yeah, your commitment to serving our country is beyond commendable, and I want to express that, my heartfelt gratitude and thanks. um yes, so if you have any message to veterans who may be watching, and then any closing remarks, please go ahead, Ed.
Well, I guess the one thing I would have to say to my fellow veterans is, don't lose heart. Don't think anything you've done is a lost cause. Um, I have fought for a lot of things that would have been considered lost causes. There's a lot of things I didn't turn out the way I wanted, but I would do it all over again because it was the right thing to do. Never look at what you've done as a lost cause. And if you're struggling, reach out, get help, because your brothers are out there.
Yeah, even outside of the veteran community, we're here too, and there's plenty of us would like to be of help in any way that we can. Um, okay, thank you, Ed. Thank you for joining us today. Uh, Aside from the message to the veterans, if there is anything else you'd like to, um,
I think I can pretty well leave it with that,
okay.
unless you've got any other questions.
No, thanks a lot, and thank you to our dear viewers who are watching. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you enjoyed the episode, and the bell for the notifications. Yeah. Again, thank you, Ed. It's a pleasure to have you, and hope to
Like I always tell you, I'm,
see
I'm
you
here
here again.
anytime you need me, my friend.
Appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.